So this problem says find the general antiderivative of this function. So how do we do an antiderivative? Well, you remember the derivative rule, right? X to the n, the derivative is nx to the n minus 1. So then the antiderivative does the opposite of that. It's the opposite derivative. Instead of subtracting 1 from the power, it adds 1. Instead of multiplying by that in the front, it multiplies by 1 over that. So there it is. There's the anti-rule. So we start with this one here, this x squared. We just add 1 to the power. That's how they get the third. And then we divide by that. See how it becomes 1 over that in the front. That's how they got that. Again, you add 1 to the power and then divide by that 3, negative 1/3. There we go. Now the next one's a little funny. How do we do the antiderivative of that? Well, let's take a look. So 6 over x, that's really 6x to the minus 1, right? Okay, so let's do the antiderivative rule. What's the antiderivative? Well, it says you add 1 to the power. So if I do that, I'm going to get x, if you add 1 there, it's going to be x to the 0, right? You add 1 to the power, and then you divide by that number you get. So now the 6 is already, the 6 just sits out front, just like it does for the derivative. Numbers in the front multiplying just sit there like a spectator. But now I've got to divide by that 0, right? That's what the antiderivative rule says. You add 1 to the power and then divide by that. The 6 is just sitting there the whole time. He's not doing anything. I add 1 to the power, makes it 0, and then divide by that. Well, what is 6 over 0? That's undefined. It's infinity. We can't do that. So that didn't work. Well, then what are we going to do? Well, when you're thinking about the antiderivative, ask yourself, you're saying, okay, let's go back to 6x, 6 over x. In fact, let's go to 1 over x. 1 over x. What what is the antiderivative? It didn't of 1 over x, or I'll just do 6 over x. I don't want to confuse you. 6 over x. What's the anti? Well, we just tried the rule. It didn't work. Right. So now we just need to think. Do you know of any function whose derivative will go back to that? What function do you know that has a derivative 1 over x? What has a derivative? See, let me put it here. What has a derivative that's 1 over x? Let's get rid of the 6 for a minute. You remember? It's 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 the 6 is going to sit in front. It's 6 natural log x. Remember? The natural log is 1 over the argument. The 6 just sits there. 6 is just right there. But natural log, it's 1 over the argument. So that must be the anti, because the derivative of 6 natural log x goes back to 6 over the argument, right? So then that's the anti. Just think derivative backwards. So 6 over x, the antiderivative must be 6 natural log x, because the derivative of 6 natural log x, remember what you do for natural log, you put 1 over x, goes back to 6 over x. So that's how they did that. That's the anti. Now, so I'm just kind of showing you part by part. Here, let's do this. I probably should have done this more general. Let me rewrite the original. So the original function was minus x squared plus 6x to the minus. I'm going to rewrite each of these parts. This is minus 5x to the minus 2, right? That x, yeah, I'm not doing any derivatives. I'm just rewriting this. And this root x is x to the half power. Is that good? I'm just simply rewriting right now. And then let's do the anti. And how we write the anti generally is we do a capital F. That's the anti. That's how we do it. We don't do a prime. Anyway, so back to it. You add 1 to the power and then divide by that, right? Whoops, better 3 there. We go back and redo these again. This one, we just figured out it's natural log x, because natural log goes back to 1 over x. So that's the anti. Now, what do you do with this guy? You add 1 to the power. That'll make it what? Negative 1, and then divide by that. Minus 5 over negative 1. Just didn't do that very well. Negative 1. Right? You get in the rule, you add 1 to the power instead of subtracting 1. And what do you well, then what is that power? Negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. Then you divide by that in the front. Okay, then minus 5. Again, you add 1 to the power. Now what's that going to be? That's that's going to be equal to 3 halves, right? Because it's a half plus 2 halves, which is 3 halves. So that'll make it x to the 3 halves. Now you got to divide by that, divide by 3 halves. But that's a little weird. Well, you could do that. Here, let me clean it up. So that means this is going to be minus 1/3 x to the third plus 6 natural log x. These two negatives will cancel, plus 5x to the minus 1. Now this 3 halves will flip up and become 2/3. Because remember, dividing, let me write that better. Dividing is upside down multiplying. So it'll be times 2 over 3. So that'll be minus 10/3 x to the 3 halves. And that's what they got. And the plus c is always out there because that could be any constant number. The derivative of it would be 0. It would go back. So this is the antiderivative, meaning if I took the derivative of this, it would go back to that, into that, into that, into that. It's the antiderivative. And there we go.